Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to be doing some maintenance on my PRS Silver Sky SE. I'm going to do a string change, clean the fretboard, clean the body a little bit, and I'm going to teach you how to take a floating trim and make it non-floating, and then how to make a non-floating trim a floating trim. Got a lot of comments on that on the dedicated review of this guitar that I did, which I'll have linked somewhere around here for you to go watch. So buckle in. We're going to get to working on this guitar right now. Okay, the first step is to have all of your shit sort of organized. I've got a Music Nomad toolkit. I have some Dunlop fretboard cleaner, which came with its own cool little cloth. I've got stuff to clean the body and to lubricate the nut. We've got some strings. I'm going to go with Stringjoys. I like Stringjoys. Brushes, string winders, string clippers, headphones. I don't need those. Cloths to wipe the body, screwdriver kit to deal with the Trem cavity cover, and a tuner for when we get to that. I like all of my stuff to be within arm's reach. Makes it easier to move quickly throughout the process. Very first things first is I'm going to take the Trem arm off. For that, I need an Allen key, which I just keep a baggie of all of my Allen keys loosely in my toolkit. And then the problem is you never know which one you actually need. So you're going to take the Allen key and you're going to insert it into the set screw that's at the back end of the Trem arm hole. And what that does is creates tension on the Trem arm so that it doesn't float around willy-nilly. That way you can hold it in the air and you see the Trem arm stay still. But if I want it to move, it can move. But if I want it to stay up, it'll stay up. You do that by tightening the set screw. So we're going to loosen the set screw, which allows us to remove the Trem arm. Obviously, tightening the set screw will make it so that you can't remove the Trem arm so easy. When you're dealing with a guitar that has a Trem and you're doing the string changes, you end up flipping the guitar up and down and all of that, and the Trem arm kind of gets in the way. So taking that off right now is helpful to ensure that it stays out of the way as we start working on taking off the strings and cleaning up the body. All right, next step, get the strings off. These are, I believe, also Stringjoy strings, but they've probably been on here for almost a year, if not a whole year. Don't really play this guitar all that much. I do like it from time to time to, play like a normal Stratocaster. But to be honest, the thickness of the neck and the aggressive 8.5-inch fretboard radius, it's not the most comfortable for my hands. I have small hands, make your jokes, and I like a thinner fretboard for that reason. And I've noticed that I kind of tend to enjoy flatter fretboards as well. Okay, so I got all of the strings loosened up, and now I'm just going to clip each of the strings sort of in the middle. I didn't used to do this. What I would do is just unwind up here at the headstock, and then I would pull through the body here. The issue that I kept running into, and which many of you probably already knew, is the very... Oh, that's not going to stop. The way the end of the string is all kinked like that, as you pull it through, it just grabs and scratches on everything. Makes it pretty awful to deal with. Hard to pull it through the body all the way, but it also scratches everything up. So I don't want to do that. So I took the advice of probably some other YouTubers and started cutting the strings like this. That way I can take them off of this end and then this end separately to avoid any issues with scratching. So let's go ahead and get those off. Boy. See, it's getting stuck right now at this very end. And that's not even the difficult part, trying to go through all the various nooks and crannies of this bridge. So, here we go. All right. And then, this part can be tough sometimes. You just push it through the back. Occasionally, with this specific guitar, the ball ends will actually get kind of stuck a little bit. And then I have to push pretty hard. And sometimes, yeah, see, that one's getting stuck. Let's see. These are all getting pretty stuck. The lighter gauge strings are the hardest because they are flimsy, I guess, as I'm trying to push them through. But if you take a thicker gauge string, this is actually the low E string, and I just put it in there and push, and that pushes the ball end right out of wherever it's stuck at. It makes it a lot easier. Kind of a pain, but not difficult. We'll shove all of those through. And ta-da, they're all here on the back. I lost one behind me. Now we've got the strings are off, so I can do some cleaning of the body. I always start with the fretboard, and I'll start with this Music Nomad brush. It's got this piece, which is pretty good for when the strings are on, getting underneath the strings to do some dusting, and this piece, which is just a sick feather duster. And I like to use that to get as much dust off of the guitar as possible before I start wiping anything down. If you've watched my other restring tutorials, you know I'd like to do that because if you have any dirt or loose debris on the surface of the guitar and you start scrubbing it with a cloth, the cloth can grab that debris and then just start scratching up the surface of the guitar. That's a tip that I learned from watching people doing car washing on YouTube. There's actually a whole YouTube genre of guys who wash cars in an aggressively high level of detail, and you can learn a lot of tips and tricks from them. You know, kind of like every little thing that you could be interested in. There's a YouTube community out there teaching you how to do it at the highest level. It's no surprise that there's also car washes out there. All right, and we're gonna keep going with a little bit of dust in. I am just now realizing that I have the wrong fretboard cleaning supplies. This cleaning kit for fretboards is not made from maple. Maple is, I think it's either more or less porous than your normal types of woods, and certain types of cleaning solutions, which I don't actually know off the top of my head. I'll try to put something down here after I research it in post editing, giving you a better description. But almost every like fretboard cleaner will say don't use on maple, and then you got to go use a dedicated fretboard oil. So I'm going to disappear very quick to go get my, and we're back. All right, so this is Music Nomad F1 oil. This is for unfinished fretboards. Basically, maple. It's a little bit different type of solution. The neat thing is now it's one step instead of two, because the other cleaning kit is two steps. There's a cleaning step and then a conditioning step. This one is more or less just conditioning. I think the F1 oil, I think it's mostly for conditioning, but with a little bit of solvent in it. There's a nice brush for if you have a lot of deep stains. I don't, so I'm not going to use this too much. This cloth is what you use to scrub. It looks like it has a tough side and a soft side. So let's see. Direction, shake bottle. Put a small amount directly on fretboard or cloth and work into the fretboard to clean and condition the wood. For really dry fretboards, let the oil soak for a few minutes before cleaning, like away the excess. All right, straightforward. So I am going to just put a little bit on the board, not too much, and then we're going to use the soft side because this fretboard is not very dirty at all. Just gonna get in there real good. Boy, you can really see the fretboard kind of liven up a little bit. It just went from basic dull wood, like what you would see at Home Depot, sort of color, and now it's got a little bit more gloss almost. That's probably just because it's got oil on top of it. Once the oil seeps in, excuse me, and is dried up a little bit, I bet you that goes away and it starts to look just like regular maple. I was a very big fan of the maple fretboard Silver Sky SEs when they came out. Initially, I wanted to buy the green guitar with the rosewood fretboard. Was it actually rosewood or was it like Palfero or something? I can't remember. Probably actually rosewood. But when they announced the maple and I saw this particular sort of blue green color with the maple fretboard, I was like, oh man, that's the one. That's it. It looked really, really clean and lively. So I'll get up here in the headstock area. Not too bad. I don't get a lot of dust, dirt, grime in my home, and I don't really leave home too much with my guitars. Although this particular guitar is my camping guitar. It's the lightest, sort of easiest to transport guitar that I have, and it has a really nice gig bag. So I use this one to take camping in my wife and I, we have an RV that we will take out from time to time. This oil smells very good, by the way. You didn't see that. Okay. That's the fretboard. Let's put everything back. By the way, I do have, and down below, a link to Z-Sounds where you can purchase pretty much any of the tools that I'm using here. They carry Music Nomad, Dunlop, everything. They also have a lot of other interesting tools that I don't have yet, but I'm interested in getting at some point. So I'll leave links to those down below. If you use those links, then I will get a small commission. You don't have to pay anything extra, but it will help me be able to afford more strings. So I can do more string changes and more oil kits so I can keep doing these types of tutorials. And heck, maybe even a whole new guitar so I can show you something different than the slew of axes that I have behind me right now. Let's move on to body. All right. For the body, we got the Dunlop Formula 65. I'll tell you, and I think I've said it on other tutorials, I didn't put a ton of thought into all the different specific tools that I use. I went with ones that were popular recommendations. Like if you filter on any of the websites like Z-Sounds, and if they are popular, I assume they work well. And then I started using them, and they did indeed work well. so I stuck by them. I haven't seen any need to switch from using the Dunlop uh, sort of cleaning agents and oils, and the Music Nomad toolkits are really awesome. So they're pretty good buys. Just going over the body with the sort of rougher side of this towel. This I'm pretty sure is it a Dunlop? Yeah, a Dunlop towel. You can get these on Z-Zounds as well. It's got two different sides, one which is really fluffy and one which is a little more flat. The fluffy side is obviously good for gentle and, well, it's almost like gentle and aggressive because it's fluffier, so it's not going to be as scratchy, but it also has pile, which can help with getting kicked on grime a little bit better. If you do go down the rabbit hole of watching those car wash tutorials, you'll learn the trick where to clean windshields and windows on cars, they crumple up newspaper and just wet the newspaper because the ridges that get created, they're not hard enough to scratch the window, but they are hard enough to scratch off the dirt. High pile works kind of the same way. Straightforward there, huh? Body is cleaned, neck is cleaned, everything is cleaned. So now I am going to move on to the putting on the new strings. If you've watched some of my other tutorials on recent purchases, whether they were used or new guitars, you'll know that I like to go through a whole setup process when I put on new strings with a guitar I just purchased. I've owned this guitar for like 3 or 4 years. It's been set up perfectly since the very first time I got it, way before I started this YouTube channel. So I'm not going to go through that process today, which helps because that makes this a shorter video for you guys. But if you're interested in seeing it, go ahead and link down below, and maybe I will fabricate some misaligned truss rod situation that I can show you guys how to work through. All right. Before strings, not lube. Hilarious. Um, there's a lot of different ways you can lubricate the nut of your guitar, and even uh the bridge saddles. The bridge saddles on this guitar, they don't have grooves, so there's nothing really to lubricate. This is like a vintage style, so there's no grooves at all. The nut is, I mean, it's a pretty decent nut, but it's a plastic nut, so it's gonna have some abrasion to it, some ridges, some little gaps and nooks and crannies that can catch the string especially when you're using the trem and the string is loosening and tightening, and that can make your guitar go out of tune. But if you use a lubrication agent like this Music Nomad Tune It, then it creates a barrier between the string and the nut so that when you do that whammy bar dive and the string goes over the nut and then comes back, it's not grabbing on the nut, it's gliding over the lubrication layer. So I like to put in some lube. This comes with an applicator that's just got a very small brush on the end of it, and you just put it in the nut slot. A little goes a long way. And once you get through all 6, you're in good shape. I should note, now that I'm thinking about it, I skipped a step on the neck. I did not polish the frets. Normally, I would do that. On this guitar, I don't think I need to because, again, I haven't been playing it very often. I'm mostly changing the strings for content. I mean, because they've been on for a year and got a little rusty. But the frets look good, so I'm going to leave them as is. Again, keep this video a little shorter for your benefit. All right, time for strings. I'm just now realizing that Stringjoy changed their packaging because it used to sort of peel open, and now did I just do it wrong? No, it doesn't do it anymore. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, it used to be like a clamshell opening, and now it's a normal box opening, just on the edge. Whatever. Okay. Ooh, and the packaging is different. It's a little more substantial. Interesting. Wonder what necessitated that. All right, so this is the 48. Be careful when opening strings because they fly everywhere. Interesting. I think they changed a lot. Did I get the wrong? No, these are still signatures. Interesting. Okay, so on the back, take your string, find the right hole, stick it through, and it'll come through the front. String through body, guitar, works that way. And then you can pull it all the way through, set it to the side. I like to go ahead and put all 6 strings through at once instead of doing it one at a time because usually I will just hold the guitar open like this and shove them all through. Trying to do that here for you guys is a little more obnoxious, so I'm going to do them one at a time, but that's fine. So a lot of different theories on how to get the right string length or what level of winds to do on the edge, anything like that. I just line the hole up on the tuning peg with the string so that it's like as straight as possible. Pull it through with decent tension, not crazy tension. And then grab at the first fret, pull back to the second fret. And then I start turning. And I hold down the string towards the tuning peg pretty hard so that it creates a kink. Some people will do the kink on the outside of the string or on the tuning peg and then just wind up really fast. I have a little bit of an OCD when it comes to these things where I like the wind of the string to be very specific. So I don't do that. What I do instead is a very laborious, tedious process of holding the string down so that it winds pretty and politely. And then in the end, the string is on good and I can clip at the tuning peg. And I find this gives me a cleaner look in the end. And I don't have to deal with any of that over under wind stuff that you see guys do, especially with the Les Pauls. Folks do some pretty complicated winding procedures, which maybe are actually faster than what I do. But to me, they feel a little more complicated, a little more involving, and they end up looking a little more wild and crazy. I don't really like the look of it. Is that the 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 guiding principle you should take to restringing your guitar? What it looks like? Probably not. Should I put more emphasis on tuning stability and the ability to play the guitar better? Maybe. Do I? No. I'll be honest as well. I think it might be luck of the draw or the fact that I don't really go out and play shows, but I just don't notice that much instability in my tuning. Yeah, the G string might go out of tune a little more often than others, but usually not enough for me to worry about it. Sometimes I can very quickly put it back in tuning by ear and I don't really care. Again, if I was recording or playing a show or something like that, I'd have to put a lot more effort into it, obviously. But I don't. I play at home and in an RV. So I can be a little more loosey goosey about some of these things. And I may end up fast forwarding through this part so that you don't have to sit and wait for me to wind 6 strings unless I can come up with something interesting to talk about. I suppose neither of us will know until and unless the video starts scrubbing through quickly right now. We are done with the getting the strings on. So now we're just going to tune to pitch. And then we'll get working on the trem. Okay, there we go. Now I have this tuned to E flat. I like strats in an E flat for some reason. I don't know. I probably heard it from somebody on YouTube and was like, I'll try that. It is interesting because I play a lot of other guitars in either drop D or E standard. So to have a guitar in E flat is a little interesting because there is a slight tonal difference, even if I'm playing basically the same things. Cool. You'll see now when I put the trem back in, I can show you that this trem is floating. You can see that it goes down and up, down and up. These Silver Skies don't come floating. They come decked, is what you call it, I guess. And that's where the trem cannot go up. It can only go down. The way you go from floating to decked is pretty easy. You just turn it over, take off the cover, and there are some screws on the inside that we will tighten. The tremolos of all types, Lloyd Rose, Gotos, Fenders, everyone, they work by leveraging springs on the back of the guitar and the strings on the front of the guitar, the strings that you play on the front of the guitar, pulling against a big metal block. And that big metal block sort of is the tie point between the strings and the springs. And they both pull at each other and you get an appropriate tension. And okay, that's interesting. Did not notice, but what I did. Can you see right there where I did not put the string all the way through? To fix that, I am not going to just push it in. We're going to have to drop tension and then put it in. Who knows what would happen if I just pushed it in, and maybe it snapped or broke or something. I don't know. But now I'm gonna end up with too many winds on this string, so that sucks. It's not really a problem. Some people theorize that the more winds you have on the string, the more likely it is to go out of tune because there's more potential for stretch over time. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. All right. In order to tighten the screws on the back, which let me just show you. Jesus. Right here. There are two screws that pull in the they stretch the strings that are on the back. And the block, this piece here, the springs are attached to the block, and that block is also attached to the bridge and attached to the springs. So these are pulling this way, and the strings are pulling this way, which is adjusting that block back and forth. Since I'm tuned to E flat, I feel a little comfortable just going ahead and screwing in these a little bit. When adjusting the float of a trem, you want to go in very small increments. You don't need to go all the way right off the bat. So I'm going to switch to a bigger screwdriver head, I think, because this is a bigger screw. And then we're just going to do maybe half a turn at a time. Do you know what? I lied about the screw head. With a Phillips head screwdriver, it's pretty easy to tell how many rotations you've done because you got the 4 different points. And so if you rotate so that up here, this point, you rotate so that it's that one, and now it's over here, that's a quarter because 1, 2, 3, 4. So when I say quarter turn, I mean this. If I say half turn, I mean 1, 2. And then, of course, if my arms could reach all the way around, we'd talk about 3s, 4s, 5s. All right. When you tighten or loosen the springs on the back, it affects the tuning of the strings on the front. So after you do your quick tightening, you come on and you retune. When you tighten the strings on the back, it will make your strings on the front go sharp because it is pulling this way, which stretches the strings on the front. So they didn't go out of tune. I'm just going to go with another half turn. And you keep doing this until the trem is what they call decked. This is still pretty high, to be honest. So I'm going to go ahead and go one more turn. Well, a half a turn, right? So 1, 2 points. And then 1, 2 points. And then it's getting close. It's probably still no good. I'm going to retune at this point. Feel like we've done enough. And yeah, so now the strings are sharp. So I'm going to down tune. Okay, and the reason that you wouldn't go ahead and tighten the springs to the point where the trem is resting on the body immediately is because when you tighten those springs, the strings on the front go sharp, which means you have to lower the pitch. And when you lower the pitch, the trem will start to drop even more. Because when you stretch the strings, or when you give them more length, when you lower them, you give them more length. That allows the trem to fall backwards. So now I have, actually we're very close. So I'm going to go another set of 2 points, 2 turns. 1, 2. 1, 2. And then we're going to detune it again. This can be very tedious. So if you're wanting to go from floating to not floating or the other way around, be prepared. It'll take you some time, especially if you are changing string gauges and all that other stuff, and you have to deal with um, truss rod and string height and all kinds of other nonsense that can go with setting up a guitar. Learning to set up your guitar on your own can be a huge game changer. It'll save you a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of time without your guitar over having to take it to a tech. And it gives you the ability to play around with stuff, to maybe more thoroughly learn what you do and don't actually like in the field of a guitar. When you actually understand how the rod truly does affect the neck and you can play around with it every week or two, just give it a quarter turn and see what happens. Then you can learn what you actually do like your truss rod relief to be. When you are taking your guitar to a tech, you're going to get a wonderful professional job, but it's going to be done. And then you're going to have to live with that because you don't know how to change it. And taking it back to the tech to change it every couple of weeks can get very expensive. So a lot of times you will end up in a position where you are simply living with whatever the tech decided. All right. So now, look at that. It is no longer able to move. I'm pulling up and doesn't do anything. We're tuned to pitch, and it is what they call dicked. You can see how it's touching the body. All right. That's how you go from a floating trim to a non-floating trim. So next, we're going to go in the opposite direction. And I bet you can't guess how we get that accomplished. I'm just kidding. Obviously, it's the same thing. We're going to loosen the screws in the back until we can get the trim to sit at a height that is just parallel with the body. If you've noticed, let me get this back over here. The front of the trim up here where the screws are is lifted off the body. This back part is not. So when we go to float, we want to get it to the point where the back part is the same height off the body as the front part. That gives you the ability to go forward and backwards with the trim arm. Some people will say nonsense like you should only allow the guitar to go forward and backwards by like a half pitch or something like that. You don't really need to worry about that. That's a finesse that you'll have to develop with your own hand. So if you make it so that the trim, I don't need that yet, is floating level with the body, you should be able to go forward and backwards. If when it's floating level with the body, you can't go backwards up to a half tone or a whole tone, whichever it is that you want, then you're in a position where you kind of have to raise the whole bridge because you do not want your trim to be pitched forward in the floating position. That will definitely cause tuning stability issues and will mess with, like if you're palm muting, you're always going to be pushing down a tiny bit and making your strings go sharp. So it can be ridiculous. So we're going to loosen these strings. I happen to remember that we did about 8 points, so like 2 full rotations. So I'm going to do that a little slower. I'm going to go one at a time. So 1 full rotation at a time, which is going to be 4 points, right? Remember when we rotate 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's do that on both screws. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Be careful not to strip these screws. You will be in some pain if you strip the screws because now you gotta go find replacement screws, which can be difficult. barely went out of tune. Loosened yet. So I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do another full turn because I know we went a long distance. And if I were doing this fresh from the start and I didn't know how far we went to put it flat on the body, then I would go in probably half turns, 2 ticks at a time. But since I know we got a ways to go, I'm going to go full tick. 1, 2, 3. I may end up overshooting though, which would be terrible. And, my problem to deal with, I guess. Definitely went flat that time, which means we're going to actually get the bridge raised. Right, now we're tuned to pitch, and we are... It's definitely raised, but it's not parallel. So I'm going to go half turn this time, right? So just 2 ticks. 1, 2. 1, 2. One thing to keep in mind as well is that it's the same elevation on both sides. So as I'm looking right now, it does look like the treble side is higher. So I'm going to put that in 1 tick just because I know that I need it. You want the bridge to be level on both sides if you can. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes folks do prefer to have different pieces so that it's maybe higher on the bass side than the treble side for different types of whammy bar usage, right? If you're doing heavy dive bombs up on your power chord areas, in a drop D tuning, you might want a little more play with the bass strings and maybe less play on the treble. Who knows? It's your choice. Just remember to be careful with those screws because you can back them out. You can back them all the way out, and then the springs will make a loud noise, probably scare you a little bit, and you'll have to figure out how to get it back in, which is not the easiest thing in the world. Definitely doable for the average, guitar enthusiast. It's just stretching a spring, but it can be a pain in the butt just because of how hard they are. So be careful not to back out the screws from that trem. Okay. I'm going to call that perfect. Check it out now. Do you see how the trem is level with the body at the front and the back? That is perfect. And now, when I put the trem bar back in, you will see that we can go down, but also after we get it all done, I gotta re-engage this set screw on the trem arm, which I do not remember where I put the correct Allen key. Put it back in here. Yep, looks like I did. Same, well, opposite as before. Instead of lefty loosey, we're going righty tighty. When you're putting these set screws in, you do not have to go tight. You only have to go to I don't know, just to the point of tightness and tension, and then kind of just a little bit more, and then play around with it. It's obviously good. And I did not, there was no cranking it. I just went boop. And then right when it was hard to do, I just a tiny bit more. That's all you need. All right. Namely, I'm going to screw on the trim cavity cover and talk a little bit about the pros and cons of doing a floating Tremo versus a non-floating Trem. So obviously, if you have something like a Floyd Rose, you're usually going to have that floating. Floyd Rose, they got the start by not being floating, but very few people are using a non-floating Floyd Rose nowadays. The purpose of the floating, again, is to allow you to go up in pitch and down in pitch. That's obviously the pro. The con. Well, some people will say that tuning can be problematic because you're stuck in one tuning. If you tune to drop D and you have a Floyd Rose, you end up with the inability to change the tuning to like standard tuning because it's locked on both ends in order to change that much. But the real big problem isn't as much that it's a locking trim, it's mostly because the trim that is floating has that tension going that we talked about, where if you change the pitch of one string, you affect the pitch of all other strings. That can be problematic for some people who like to tune to different tunings on the same guitar frequently. Now, if you're trying to tune crazy jumps in tunings, like going from E standard to, drop C, you're probably going to need truss rod adjustments anyway. So you're not always likely to run into a real issue with tuning when you're running a floating trim because you're probably most likely just going from standard to drop tuning and whatever you are. So maybe you're in E standard and you're going to drop D, or you can be in D standard going to drop C, and that kind of stuff. 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, that's what's going on. So that's a con if it's a con for you, but there's definitely folks out there who can make that tuning swap and not really suffer too much of a consequence. It'll affect the float of the guitar. You might have to retune all the strings instead of just dropping the one string, which kind of sucks, but you won't have to deal with the truss rod too much unless you're using super heavy gauge strings and super low tunings because they have more precarious relationship with the tuning altogether. So what's the pro and con of having the non-floating trim? Well, tuning. If the trim is not floating, you can tune to whatever you want at any time, and you won't ever have to worry about the trim getting out of whack. You may have to deal with the truss rod again if you're trying to go from E standard to C standard or something, or increase the string gauge or something like that. But you're gonna have to do that no matter what kind of bridge you have, whether it's even a hardtail bridge. So, floating trim versus non-floating trim, the biggest problem you're gonna have is just when you try to go into drop D or drop tuning from a standard tuning, you're gonna have to tune all 6 strings instead of just the one. That's the major difference. Any other issue with string tuning or trim tension or anything like that, you're gonna have whether you have a floating or a non-floating trim. So yeah, if you want to do a floating trim so that you can go up in pitch, you would be able to do that just fine. And the only sacrifice you'll make is quickly switching to drop tuning is gonna suck. If you want to prioritize the ability to quickly switch to drop tuning, you might be willing to sacrifice the ability to go up in pitch. So that's going to be a you decision. This is how you do it, how you go from floating to non-floating or from non-floating to floating. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like the video, subscribe to my channel. Let me know what you want to see next as far as maintenance goes. Let me know if any of these guitars back here pique your interest. I have reviews on some of them. Those will be linked in the description. And if you are interested or prepared to buy any cleaning supplies or maintenance tools, go ahead and use my link down below. It'll help out the channel. It'll help me pump out more content and more tutorials for you guys. You won't have to pay anything extra, like I said before, but I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you for sticking around with me this far, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. See you later.